Welcome to the third annual Slow Living Summit in beautiful downtown Brattleboro, and this beautiful Greco-Deco theater that we have here, a real jewel of the community, the Latches Theater. My name is Lori Hanau, and for those of you that weren't here last night, I have been given the privilege of emceeing the plenaries. We have 2 today and 2 tomorrow. And I just want to get a sense of who's in the house here. And so I see a line of people already standing as they're walking in, and maybe they can raise their hands if this applies to them. But for anyone for whom this is your first summit, would you please stand? Wow! Wow, how beautiful. Welcome. Welcome. Yeah, right? Right? And then for anyone who has been to 2 summits, would you stand? Welcome. And then you may want to stay standing, anyone who has been to all 3, that this is the 3rd summit. All right, the anchors, thank you. Thank you so much. So I just want to also do a few announcements for the morning before we begin with the program. And if you haven't done so already, would you please just either silence or turn off your cell phones? I also want to acknowledge that as a part of the privilege of emceeing and going over announcements and introducing the speakers, I also have the responsibility and the joy of supporting the good energy in the hall room. And of course, there is no way in the world I can do that by myself, that's really up to all of us. And so, and I also know that many of us work with groups and are used to having to work with time. So I'm going to just ask all of us to be really mindful of being on team flow and together really supporting, maybe getting here 5 minutes before the plenaries start, grounding in your bodies, taking a nice deep breath, and being aware that together we are supporting the intelligence, the wisdom, and the good spirit of our experience here. I also want to encourage the sitting up front or sitting close together, which I see that we are doing, so thank you for that. And I want to let you know that to please make sure you check out the literature table in the lobby throughout the summit, and that after this morning's plenary, which is, of course, Agriculture, Food, and Food Systems, Reconnecting Farmers, Eaters, and Healthy Communities, there will be a book signing by Francis and Judy in the lobby, and they will be available then for any questions or comments that you have for them, and they'll be here for most of the day today if you want to connect with them one-to-one. And then also, I want to make you aware of the books and sponsor table, which is over at the River Garden, which is where we'll be having lunch. And back here in the lobby here of the Latches Theater, we also have a pad for the gathering of our collective wisdom. And we just want to invite you to make any comments that you may have about what slow living means to you, maybe some ideas of how you practice, so we can share our practices together, and then any other questions or comments that you may have around slow living. The breakout sessions are at the Marlboro Grad Center. Some of them are in the Latches Complex and a few other places. The room locations are on page 15 in your book. If you don't know where a room is located, just follow the flow, and there will be a couple of people over at the grad center too who can help you and guide you. And there's also a few restroom strategy tips in your book which you may find helpful. After this morning's breakout sessions, lunch is served at the River Garden, which is 1 block north up on Main Street on the right-hand side, and again, just follow the crowd. We've reserved an hour and 45 minutes. We would ask you to actually be back in your seats, if you can be, about 5 minutes ahead for the afternoon's plenary. And so now, as a part of the plenaries, we have tone-setting moments to support the quality of our well-being, our presence, and our receptivity. It is my total joy to introduce to you Erica Wheeler, who will be supporting our tone setting for this morning. For those of you that may not know Erica, she is an award-winning singer-songwriter with 6 CDs to her credit. She is just back from training the staff at Yosemite National Park in her soulful sense of place process, as well as working with the Sonoma Land Trust. She's on her way to work with students at Walden Pond, but we are lucky to have her this week with us at the summit. Erica is a sense of place artist, advocate, and educator based in Western Massachusetts. She combines her passions for place, nature, culture, and history with the arts to inspire a sense of place and belonging that is deeply needed in the world today. Her work helps people slow down and tap into their senses, offering us ways to rediscover what roots in us in place and what really matters in our lives. It is with respect and joy, and I hope you join me in giving a warm welcome to Erica Wheeler.
Thank you, and good morning. It's so fun to be here. I live in Coleraine, Massachusetts. We have the same weather as you guys because we're a higher elevation, just about 45 minutes that way. But I go to events and conferences all over the country, and usually they're in a place, but we're so busy networking and connecting and in spaces that we don't get to connect with the place as much. And so my intention with doing this little short segment this morning is to just sort of ground us in this place and this time. So we're in Brattleboro, and we're here with the steep mountains and where the Connecticut River comes through and the West River meets. This land here has been occupied for at least 10,000 years. Native Americans lived here. There's petroglyphs on the rocks out on the river. I haven't seen them, but I've heard about them. Some of them are underwater, but they're there. There's thunderbirds and wolves and spirit beings that are carved in the rocks. And this town, Brattleboro, was first one of the line of forts that the Massachusetts Bay Colony created in 1724 to serve as a line of the French and Indian alliances that were sort of jockeying for position with the British who were moving up, and the French Indians that were jockeying for position there. And so in Coleraine, where I live, there was also some of these forts, and we've learned a lot about those because it was our 250th anniversary last year. So my partner and I were reading a lot about them. It's really fascinating to think about this as a frontier. Just, 1724, that was only 290 years ago. A lot has happened since then. So I just want to bring in all the people who have loved these hills. There's a quote by a Mohican poet, Karine Wood, and this poem called Homeland. It starts out and it says, "Nothing here was discovered. Everything was already loved." And so I love that quote. And so just I want to bring in the Sakoki bands of the Abenaki that lived here, and then all the settlers that came, and the French. As I was researching Brattleboro, I was amazed. I've lived in this area for 30 years. But I never thought about Vermont and what it meant, the word. But they said, Vermont, it was the French, and it was green, vert, and mont, mountain. So the Green Mountain State, Vermont. I learned something new. And so the French, and then the English, and then all the people that came and worked in the factories and the mills. We had a lot of mills because of the Whetstone River and the big waterfalls and water power. And I read about the Oregon company that was here that was world-renowned and employed hundreds of people. And it's a crossroads of transportation and railroads. And it's a crossroads with the rivers. One time the rivers were the only roads. It's a crossroads of ideas. And I love how it's such a city, it's a compact, old city, and it's just a beautiful place to be. So I'm going to sing the song dedicated to the hills and all of us here at the crossroads. And it's called Quiet Hills. It's by Claudia Schmidt. There is a darkness in these hills, I am not afraid. There is a darkness in these hills, I am not afraid. And there is a darkness in these hills, though some may tremble, I am still, no, I say, hope lives in these quiet hills. And there is a darkness in the land, I seek the taste of hope. Yeah, there is a darkness in the land, I seek the taste of hope. And there is a darkness in the land with more sorrow than we can stand. But I say, hope lives in these quiet hills. And there is a darkness in my heart, the taste of hope is sweet. Yeah, there is a darkness in my heart, the taste of hope, it's sweet. And there is a darkness in my heart, but I can feel the healing star. 'Cause I say hope lives in these quiet hills. Yeah, hope lives in these quiet hills. Hope lives in these quiet hills. Thank you so much. And it does, and continues to. So as I was thinking about this summit and slow living, I was reminded of some passages in this book by David Abrams, The Spell of the Sensuous, where he talks about song and the pace of life. And if some of you aren't familiar with this book, it's a wonderful accompaniment to all of what we're learning here. But he talks about Gary Snyder, the poet and author, who in 1981 traveled to Australia. And he was sitting in the back of a pickup truck with an Aboriginal man named Jimmy. And Jimmy was reciting what he was seeing. They were traveling through the desert. And he was speaking very, very, very fast. And what is true is that he was reciting everything that they were going by, and he was used to going by life at 4 miles an hour, and they were traveling at 25 miles an hour. Woo! And so these poems, these mnemonic devices, these stories of the land, were how he knew where he was and who he was. And so, it just made me think of life in the fast lane. I'm not going to sing that song, but but we all go, through life at a 70-mile-an-hour pace, and just think about that. So he also referenced Bruce Chatwin in the book Songlines, where he was also with another person who was singing this song very, very fast, and it was the cat lines. They were walking where the cats go, and he was saying, okay, so there's that mountain, and there's that tree, and there's that river, and there's that, and that's how he knew his way. And when the driver slowed down to the pace of a walk, it became very melodic and beautiful and harmonious and soothing. And so I just think that's a good image. I know I just want to say I'm very honored and grateful to be here, and honored that they chose to have some music. A lot of events, they'll say, we don't have time for music. And so the Slow Living had 10 minutes, and I really, I think that's great. And when I looked at the schedule of events, I thought I would really love to participate in the one with Judy and Francis, because I know their work, and they are inspiring, pioneering, luminescent luminaries in the whole movement of food and farm and finance. And I wanted to sing this song, which is about someone who might have sold their farm and regretted it. It's about Hadley, Massachusetts, which is near where I live. And my point being that I think places have a song, they have a music. Every place has a song and a music. Every person has a song, every day, every moment. So I was driving along the river road there. It was this beautiful summer day, and the swallows were flying, and I was just in that zone, the music of the day, the music of the road. And then, boom, there was this brand new housing development. And it was just kind of jarring. It didn't quite fit in, and it changed the music. And it started this song in my head, and I want to tell you my process, which was, at first it was kind of an anthemic anti-Walmart song, and it was like, we will stop the, it was very preachy, and it felt good. 2 more minutes? Oh, Laurie says 2 more minutes. I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm going to sing the song now. I have a sing-along that you're really going to want to do, but we have to create time for that after this. So the swallows and the roads, and yes, it was jarring, and I just, anyways, I discovered land trusts and how they support alternatives for selling off the family farm. And this song is dedicated to all the people that do provide alternatives to that situation. And I will also have my little cart, and I will also be peddling CDs out in the lobby. And if you want to hear more from me, that's a good format to do that in. So I'll be here for the whole weekend, for the whole week, and I'm doing my workshop at 3:15 or 3:45 in the afternoon. So come. Down comes a falling, a soft summer rain. It falls on the cornfields of this river floodplain. It falls on the green hills and the roadside stands. You pay leaving money in an old coffee can. There's a broken gas pumps and the barn falling down. There's a swimming hole where the river's fatting around. And that farm, it still haunts me, just like it's calling out my name. Don't it seem like a waste of good summer rain? There's more people moving in, they all need a home. They put up stores and houses in the fields that I had known, on the richest soil you're ever gonna find. Traffic backs up now most all the time. Your children won't know it the way I did. Up the river road, how I used to live. And that farm, it still haunts me, just like it's calling out my name. Don't it seem like a waste of good summer rain? It's almost time for second planting. I can feel it in the air. Oh, I wish I'd never sold that place. Now there's just asphalt everywhere. fields and farms the way life's always been. And that farm, it still haunts me, just like it's calling out my name. Don't it seem like a waste of good summer rain? It don't seem like a waste of good summer rain. Thank you so much. Just hope to see more of you.
Thank you so much, Erica. All right. It is my joy to introduce Orly Munzing, who has a friendship, a long-standing friendship with Frances, and so very much wanted to introduce Frances herself. And I certainly felt that it was due a moment or two to introduce Orly. And Orly is the founder and executive director of the Strolling of the Heifers, but also, of course, has her hand deeply in the Slow Living Summit. Drawing on her background as an educational consultant, she gathered a group of volunteers in 2001 to help focus attention on the difficulties of the small family farms in the Brattleboro region. In 2002, they organized the first annual Strolling of the Heifers, a parade and festival celebrating farmers and aiming to connect people with healthy local food. And I know that a lot of you stood up who are here for the first time, and if you have any opportunity to stay for any part of the Strolling of the Heifers, it is a magical experience. Please stay. With the growth of the local food movement since then, the Stroll has expanded to a full weekend, which is annually rated as Vermont's top 10 summer events. Under Orly's leadership, over the years, the Strolling of the Heifers launched educational programs, a microloan fund, and a farm internship program for youth, which are now all carried on by other organizations. Besides the summit, Strolling of the Heifers also currently organizes the Vermont Farm Food Business Plan Competition in collaboration with Vermont Technical College. I also want to say that I completely believe that Orly is Brattleboro's force of nature. I'm convinced she's a wizard, because every time she comes toward me, and I hear this from others, I automatically find myself saying yes to whatever it is she needs or wants. It's amazing. So Orly, please come on up, and if we can have a warm welcome for Orly. A real contributor to the community.
If I don't stand on my little stool, you won't see me. Welcome to everybody. For those of you who were not here last night, I welcome you. And I didn't even have a chance to see Frances. Frances, oh my God, you're here. Okay. It was so wonderful yesterday. The organizing committee is exhausted. We haven't slept in days. And yesterday, I have to report to you, was so exciting. With all the funds that we raised at the Strolling of the Heifers the previous year, we give out. And it was such a joy to have our farm food business plan competition. And this year, it's a statewide competition, and we joined forces with Vermont Technical College, and we gave out $60,000 to new businesses, a student category, and existing businesses. And we've had amazing success stories with this, and it's just so wonderful. And then to come here and open the session with all the wonderful presenters and the memorial for Keith and for Helen, just amazing. And here we are again, and all of you are here to support it. The main question we would like to ask throughout the conference is, what can you learn in the slow lane that you can't learn in the fast lane? What does a slow living world look like? Well, we all sat there And it's work in progress from all the different conferences that we've had. And you've all contributed to this. Slow living is living within our means and living within the means of the earth and what the earth can sustainably provide. Slow living is more time for family, community, and yourself. It is a fuller and more prosperous life in terms of human happiness and fulfillment. Slow living is vibrant communities and bioregions with strong economic and social resilience. Slow living encourages sacred economics, a gift-centered economy with more connected, sustainable ways of doing business. Slow living celebrates and rewards socially and environmentally responsible entrepreneurship and activism. Slow living is for all people. It is for people who live in rural areas, small towns, and large cities. For people who are young, who are old, wealthy, and struggling. We're all seeking a better way, a saner way, and a happier way to live and organize our lives. Therefore, I do hope that you enjoy your experience at this 3rd Annual Slow Living Summit and take away much learning from our amazing roster of speakers and presenters, as well as from each other. As I did last night, I would not be able to close this introduction without expressing our sincere appreciation for all the summit organizers, especially Martin Langeveld, the coordinator of this year's summit, and Strolling Marketing and Slow Living Summit Director. And of course, the many, many volunteers, sponsors, speakers, and presenters for helping make this event possible. It simply could not be at all without all the help and support and generous donations of time, energy, funding, and in-kind supplies and services that we receive. And also, being here at the Latches Theater, every part of Brattleboro supports this event, and we're so grateful for that. I especially want to thank our presenting sponsor of the Strolling of the Heifers and the Slow Living Summit, which is Merchants Bank. Our other sponsors are AgriLiving, Crop Organic Vodka and Farmers Gin, Sandy River Charitable Foundation, Lydia B. Stokes Foundation, Greenmount Coffee Roasters, Marlborough College, and World Learning. We couldn't do it without them. All their support, guidance, and welcoming of their buildings. Global Roundtable Leadership, Vermont Tech, Solidago Foundation, and the many other sponsors you've seen on the screen, and I refer you to your program. We invite everyone to stay after the summit for the lighter, whimsical Strolling of the Heifers. When the doors open here on Friday, the street will be closed, and it will be an agricultural Mardi Gras with food tasting, music. We have a quiche competition, and our wonderful, whimsical, funny governor will be the MC giving out awards. So do come, stay, and enjoy. So please enjoy the summit. Listen, learn, make valuable connections, contribute your thoughts, work on your own inner transformations, and share slow living back in your network. It gives me personal honor and pleasure to welcome Frances Moore LePay. It's sort of a welcome back home to Frances. Many of you know her as a neighbor and friend from the many years she lived right here in Brattleboro. I first met the author, Frances, in 1973 in my junior year at Boston University, where I received a required reading assignment, Died for a Small Planet. That very powerful book resonated with me and has helped shape my views. Little did I know that many years later, I would have a chance to meet Frances personally. My mom, Sarah Enzer, and Frances' dad, John Moore, have both moved to Brattleboro to be closer to their daughters, and coincidentally became next-door neighbors and good friends. My mom would tell me how John has a very caring daughter, and I must meet her. Okay, Mom, okay. So my mom arranged a tea for us to meet, and I had no idea this was the person whose book has influenced my life so much. I got to see how caring and respectful she was to her amazing dad and how mindful and giving she is as a person. It is a privilege to have such a friend as Frances. She's a pioneer and a true example of slow living. Frances is the author of 18 books, including 3 million copies were sold of Diet for a Small Planet. Her most recent work, EcoMind, Changing the Way We Think to Create the World We Want, is a winner of a silver medal from the Independent Publisher Book Awards. I have to tell you, the book is powerful and inspiring. EcoMind will open your eyes and change the way you think. It's a must-read book. By the way, Frances's book, EcoMind, as well as Judy's Wick's book, Good Morning, Beautiful Business, will be on sale immediately after the plenary, and also will be on sale at the River Garden with all the other speakers' books during lunch and tonight's meetup from 5 to 8. Frances is the co-founder of 3 organizations, including Food First, Small Planet, and Small Planet Fund. Frances has received 17 honorary doctorates from distinguished universities. In 1987, in Sweden, Frances became the 4th American to receive the Right Livelihood Award. In 2003, she received the Rachel Carson Award from the National Nutritional Foods Association. She was selected as one of 12 living women whose words have changed the world by the Women's National Book Association. In 2008, she was honored by the James Beard Foundation as the Humanitarian of the Year. In the same year, Gourmet magazine named Frances among 25 people, including Thomas Jefferson, Upton Sinclair, and Julia Child, whose work has changed the way American eats. Diet for a Small Planet was selected as one of 75 books by women whose words have changed the world by members of the Women's National Book Association. In my closing introduction of Frances, I'd like to quote what the Washington Post said about Frances. Some of the 20th century most vibrant activist thinkers have been American women: Margaret Mead, Jeanette Rankin, Barbara Ward, and Dorothy Day, who took it upon themselves to pump life into basic truth. Frances Moore LePay is among them. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome home Frances Moore LePay.
Thank you so much. Orly, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
We're trying the lavalier mic. So if you cannot hear me at any point, wave wildly, because it's so disappointing to end a talk and realize nobody heard what you said. Orly, I can't tell you, I cry very easily, so I shouldn't say much more about it, but it's great to be home in Brattleboro. I spent some wonderful, wonderful years here. It was exactly 20 years ago, next week, that I moved here. And so it is kind of an anniversary of a rich, rich part of my life, and many of my closest friends for life are here with me today. So thank you for being here. I'll see if I can get through this. If I turn on the clicker, it's supposed to vibrate. Yes. Okay. I want to start with a question for you. How many of you are deeply concerned, deeply worried about the state of our planet? Okay, I'm not surprised. Now, I'm really curious. How many of you feel that you have a working theory about why we're in this mess? Wow, you outscored just about anybody I've ever asked that question. Okay, I'm asking that question because you'll soon learn that for me, that is all important in this sense. The way I think about slow living, my own meaning of slow living, is a meaning that slow living is not about pace per se. For me, it's about whether I am aligned, whether we are aligned with our own nature and the laws of nature. If we are aligned, sometimes we'll move fast, sometimes we'll move slow, but if we're not aligned, nothing works. So that's what I'm saying to myself. If I don't have a theory about how we got into this mess, then how can I know what alignment looks like, and how can I get where I want to go? And so my talk has a lot to do with power, and I'm going to try not to speed through this, and I'm going to get a lot of help from a signer here. who's going to tell me how, because I kind of misjudged how much time I had, but you'll bear with me as I talk very fast. So here's how I began. I thought, oh, I'm 25, 26. I thought, I can't figure out what to do with my life. Oh, food, that's really important. If people can't eat, then what else matters? And so here I am about, whoops. Yes, this is going to work. We know it is. Ah, there I am. I said, oh gosh, if I could just understand why people are hungry, then I'd have direction, because I'd know what to do, because it's so basic. And so I went to the UC Berkeley Library, and very soon I learned that all the newspaper headlines and all the so-called experts who were telling us that there was not enough food in the world were wrong. And I wrote Diet for a Small Planet. I did not understand how it could be that actually we were creating the scarcity that we said was the problem, because clearly there was then enough food, and now even more so. There are now 2,800 calories produced for each of us every day on this earth, clearly enough for all of us to eat well. So, yet, get this, there are almost exactly the same number of hungry people in the world today as when I wrote Diet for a Small Planet, 1971, and Orly read it in 73. So my questions kept growing and growing, and I don't have time to take you through all of them. But finally, when I was here in Brattleboro, I came up to maybe the biggest question that I'll be holding in this lifetime, and it's this one. How do we make sense out of the fact that together we're creating a world that no one of us would choose? Because I've never been anywhere where people say, yeah, I'm getting up this morning to make sure another child dies of hunger, or to heat the planet so we'll have chaos. It doesn't happen. Why are we together creating what, as individuals, we would never tolerate, we think? So, actually, while I was living here, I read a book that changed my life by a philosopher who should be rediscovered, Erich Fromm. And in it, he helped me understand what many great seers have told us, that we see the world not as it is, but as we are. We see the world through cultural filters. Einstein said it is theory which decides what we can observe. And so we literally can't see what's outside of our mental map, this filter. So just to give you a very homey example of it, to bring it right down to the kitchen, several Thanksgivings ago, I got up to make my favorite root vegetable dish. I know exactly where I keep my big Dutch oven. I went right there to get it. I was so excited. 33 people were coming. I couldn't find it. I looked everywhere. I went to the basement. I couldn't find it. And I got really frustrated. I turned around and started doing something else. About an hour later, I turned around, and there it is. Only it has a plant in it. And I didn't see it, right? Because I was looking for a kitchen baking item, not a planter, even though it is big and red, and I still couldn't see it. So I laughed out loud, and I said, there you go. We see what we expect to see. Now, that's not so terrible. I mean, it might mess you up in the kitchen on Thanksgiving, but it's not so terrible if the mental map through which we peer is fundamentally serving life. But my thesis is that you and I are alive in this moment where the dominant way of seeing, the mental filter, is fundamentally life-destroying. And yet, and this is the good news I'm going to be getting to quickly, is that, I guess I put my watch down. Okay. It's changing. But what is this mental map that's doing us in? I want to, well, this is the core idea here, then, that it's not seeing is believing, but believing is seeing. And my thesis is that mental map in which we're trapped, that is fundamentally life-destroying, starts with the premise of lack. It is the premise of scarcity. There is not enough of anything. There's not enough food, there's not enough energy, there's not enough parking places, you name it, there's not enough. So I boiled it down to 3 S's. The separateness, stasis, and scarcity. In other words, things are pretty static, whether it's human nature or, the supplies of whatever we need, that we're all separate from one another, and the fundamental underneath it all is the lack of what I call now lack of goods and goodness. That it's not just there's not enough stuff, but there's not enough goodness in us either. So this is the premise of scarcity. Now, if we start with this distrust of self, then we, of course, distrust others. If we distrust others, of course, we distrust democracy. And we believe that we have to turn over our fate to, sorry. Sorry. There it is. We have to turn over our fate to an impersonal force that will sort things out for us. Ronald Reagan named it the magic of the market. And what happens is that wealth then accrues to wealth in this one rural market that we're driven by, that highest return to existing wealth, so that we end up with the best democracy money can buy. We end up with such concentrated wealth that it therefore infects and hijacks our democracy. So we end up then with massive hunger no matter how much we produce. I just checked the numbers from the UN yesterday or so. We're now producing per person in the world about 40% more food than when I wrote Diet for a Small Planet. And yet we have just as many people who go hungry. So we end up creating the experience of scarcity no matter how much we produce. And then we say, I told you so, I told you so. Human beings really are just these selfish little shoppers, we really don't care. And it reinforces this distrust of self, therefore distrust of democracy, therefore belief that we turn over our fate to an impersonal force that ends up creating the very thing we fear, which is increased scarcity of goods and goodness. So I'm saying that we've got to go this deep to understand what it means to align. Because this worldview that creates such concentration of wealth then ends up, and here's kind of the punchline, it ends up denying the most basic of our needs. It is so perversely aligned that it denies the most basic of human needs, which I've not so humbly tried to boil down to 3, our need for connection and meaning and power, because it is fundamentally driven by fear. And pulling off another layer, this spiral of powerlessness ends up creating, just like every organism in the environment is created by its context, ours is set to create the very conditions that known to bring out the very worst in human beings. In other words, whether it's in a lab experiment where human beings have been the guinea pigs, or you name it, Wall Street debacle, these are the kinds of conditions that bring out the very worst in human beings, and they're precisely what flows from the premise of scarcity, where we turn over our fate to a force that ends up concentrating power, secrecy, and blaming, a blame game culture. So then what I'm suggesting is that, yes, we end up creating what we most fear. But the good news is that you and I are also alive at a time when incredible breakthroughs are happening about what we know of human nature. And including, the neuroscientists are telling us that our brains are much more plastic. Neoplasticity has become, next to alignment, has become one of my most favorite words in the English language, because we realize that indeed, yes, we can remake kind of the stream beds in our brains with new ideas. And so I'm suggesting then that we are actually moving from the 3 S's to the 3 C's. I'm so proud of myself to get it down to the same letters. I want you to congratulate me. So, okay, the 3 C's then, what we are learning through ecological science, but also, as I say, through new anthropology, neuroscience, psychology, is that really, actually, what human beings, the nature of nature is not the 3 S's at all, but the nature of nature. And our nature is thriving the connection, continuous change, not stasis, and co-creation. So I often say the only choice we don't have from the eco-mind worldview is is whether we change the world. That's the only choice we don't have. Because, of course, if we live in this 3Cs world, everything we do and don't do is changing the world. So it's a completely different way of seeing the power that we have. And as we shift then from scarcity mind to eco mind, I love to quote my buddy in Germany. He's a physicist, Hans-Peter Durer, who says, Frankie, in the ecological worldview, there are no parts, there are only participants. And so that kind of sums it all up. And Dennis Noble in Oxford has written a beautiful book where he says, in ecological systems, there are no privileged components telling the rest what to do. Rather, there is a form of democracy in which all elements are shaping all other elements moment to moment. And that sort of sums up the 3Cs. Okay, so we then can shift. We can take a deep breath. We can imagine that we can shift then from this scary message, and a lot of my environmentalist buddies are locked in it, but we've hit the limit, hold back to, we can align with the rules of nature, with what we know of our own nature, and there's more than enough for all of us. This is the shift that I see happening throughout the world, and it is thrilling to me. So we shift then from limits to alignment, and then our eyes, our vision starts to shift, and we realize, yes, we can be brutal, we can be in the wrong circumstances. We know that, not a few of us, but most of us, we can brutalize each other in those 3 negative conditions of concentrated power, secrecy, and blaming. But we also know that we come soft-wired through eons of evolutionary time in tight-knit tribes. We come soft-wired with these beautiful, beautiful capacities that are right there for the ecological social ecology, a positive social ecology, to bring those out. Beautiful. And my favorite one here is the neuroscientists looked at our brains when we were cooperating and when we were competing, and they found that when we cooperate, that our brains respond like we're eating chocolate. That's how much fun it is. So we have a lot to work with if we create the conditions that bring it forth. And so then we know that we reverse the spiral of powerlessness with a fundamental trust that those qualities, capacities are there to be tapped. If we begin to build that trust, we can then move money out of control of our so-called democracy. We can start creating the containers that bring forth, as Judy has done, creating what are the common rules that make things work, that keep us out of the concentrated power, the secrecy, and blaming into the positive spiral of empowerment. And so what I'm suggesting then, it's pretty obvious, I think, that as we move around here, then we get to see that we can actually, we can actually reverse the negative conditions, and that we can begin to work toward the continuous dispersion of power, transparency in human relationships, and mutuality of accountability, not just pointing fingers. And that is what I love to call, and my center here was called, living democracy. It's not something done to us or for us. It's what we ourselves create in our communities. It's not what we have, it's what we do. And what I'm suggesting, as we move from the scarcity mind to the eco mind, the idea of a fear-driven system of lack, into an alignment with the best in us and with nature's rules, then we can imagine a social ecology. And I think that we human beings, and you can come up with your own name, but I think we need to start naming where we're going in this aligned way, because we need to see that our drops in the bucket actually end up in a bucket. Anna and I, my daughter and I, travel together, and I'm just a drop in the bucket. And when we were in Seattle one night, and it was really raining, and we said, wait a minute, buckets fill up really fast. And the problem is not being a drop in the bucket. The problem is not seeing the bucket. And so So I think, that, and this is why I love what you're doing, helping people see the bucket that we're filling up. And I love to call it living democracy. And what does that mean to me? It means that I'm going to quickly run through some stories here. It means that these are what I call the course changers toward this emergent ecology of democracy, I call living democracy, that has to do believing that we actually can have a political democracy answerable to us, that economic life is just as much about democracy as political life is, and that there are all sorts of new creative ways to actively, directly engage regular citizens in solutions building. So those are some of the so I just want to take you through examples of my course changers now, and then I'll end. I put Deb Simpson here. Do any of you know who Deborah Simpson is? She was a waitress in Auburn, Maine in the year 2000, and because they had clean elections in Maine, her friends encouraged her to run for office, and she became a brilliant legislator because money had been removed as an obstacle. Yes. And another lesson, she was defeated by outside money in the last election, precisely the problem. So she embodies both the possibility that really worked when money was kept out, and so I honor her. Deb is my hero. So definitely check out my favorite example now of a pathway to removing the power of money in politics is Represent.us, that's based in Western Mass, Represent.us. And I want to go to other countries, though, to talk about what I mean here, because part of what we're talking about is also political parties really answerable to us. And so I want to jump to Brazil, because they built, in Brazil, citizen movements over 20 years, really a short moment in political history, right? In 20 years, they built a workers' party there that was able to elect a president in 2002 and 2003, Lula, you may have heard that name, whose platform was what? Zero hunger. Can you imagine? A president going for zero hunger. And as a result, hunger has been radically reduced in Brazil. And here are some of the happy beneficiaries that my daughter took that shot of people benefiting from the zero hunger approach. And it is now in the Constitution of Brazil, the right to food. But it started, I want to say, with citizen organizers who believed, who, like we were hearing about the Hampshire students, who didn't believe they couldn't do it, so they went out and they created a political party answering to them. So also I want to take us to the examples of democracy emerging in our food system here in the United States. And Judy will be talking about that a whole lot more, but in the time I have, I'm just going to throw that up there. But you all know some of these incredible stories, and I bet Hampshire, Marlborough, I don't know, you're one of these real food challenge colleges that have committed to 20% real food, that is fair food and organic food by 2020. And so I think this is really exciting, and the food co-op movement is burgeoning. I just about fell over when I saw that you're in a co-op. I couldn't believe it. And so this is part of what I see as democratizing our economy. It's not this emergent living democracy I see. And I also see living democracy emerging in citizens' participation beyond voting in very direct ways of citizen engagement. And so I put this slide up just to show you these Malian farmers who were brought together in the citizens' jury process, where they debated about, do they want GMOs or not? And what do they want their own agricultural research department of their government to focus on? And they debated, they got a lot of information, debated, and came out very strongly opposed to GMOs. Also, yes, when people have a chance, And I just threw this in. This is not a food example, but I love it because I'm from Texas originally before I discovered Vermont. But how many of you have ever heard this story? That 8 utility companies in Texas in the 90s drew people together to think about and learn about options in energy, and they started moving toward renewable energy. And that's one of the reasons that this oil state is now a world leader in wind energy. I want to also move us to India because India is so interesting, such rich turf to learn about living democracy emerging. In the forest, for example, in India, that deforestation is a terrible crisis both for devastation of biodiversity, but of course for climate change and for people living in the forests. And yet India has devolved responsibility to families, to village forest management groups to make sure that the forests around the village are protected. And the woman who gave me the statistic, the scientist who studied this, she said, as long as there are at least 3 women in leadership, it works. And did you see this number? 10 million families involved in this. And also women groups at the smallest level in the villages are leading the way to organic agriculture in India. And in that regard, I had the most amazing experience in October. I was with these women in Andhra Pradesh in southern India to learn from them. These women, with their hands outstretched, let me just tell you what they're doing. They are pledging. They're pledging to each other to share everything they learn as they move toward organic agriculture. They are pledged to never use GMOs. And they are pledged to ultimately go completely organic. They share and save seeds. They have a caravan that goes from village to village teaching that methodology. But these women, with the pride that they showed and the sense of accomplishment, was profoundly moving. 20 years ago, these women were destitute, famine-stricken, humiliated, beaten by their husbands. And over 20 years, through their women's sanghas that meet once a week at 9 p.m. at night, they have transformed their land. I walked onto these farms that, like an acre and a half, that had 20 different crops, all the different ones we need so you could live. You get your oil seeds, their protein, millets, and they have their own medicinal garden. They even have their own radio station to teach and share what they're learning. And when I asked about climate change, they said, we're really not worried. Maybe they're overly confident, but that sense of pride that they know so much about their seeds and about their land that they can adapt and they know what to do. And the men have stopped being brutal because the women go together. If any man hits a woman, all the women go together to confront him. And as we were sitting there having our discussion, a young man served us tea. And nobody even commented on it. So I'm suggesting then that this is far and wide. This is part of what is living democracy emerging. But I want to take us in my final minutes. How am I doing? Perfect. I want to take us to a much more personal level. Because I ask myself all the time, as you do, or you wouldn't be here, what is required of me very personally, inside, to be alive in this moment of transition, when fear is so dominant, but we know that fear doesn't get us there, just reacting to it. And so what I'm suggesting is something I love to call bold humility. And it starts with rethinking fear as a form of power. That we can align with fear too in an all new way. Instead of seeing fear as just a message telling us at the wrong place, wrong time, get out of there, freeze, fight, flee, we can say, oh, maybe it's just telling me I'm right where I should be. And doing exactly what I should be for my own happiness, for the planet's happiness. And so I work on it because I have a lot of fear. And so some time ago, I realized that that pounding heart that I get, I used to say, Frankie, you wimp, what's your problem? I now say, oh, that's my inner applause going off. And it kind of works. So this rethinking fear as maybe it's just an energy source that we can use. Because, you see, here's the trick. Here's the understanding that has helped me. That we shouldn't so blame ourselves, because evolving in tightly knit tribes, the scariest thing of all was breaking from the pack, right? And yet, if the whole pack is going over the falls, so to speak, you know, we've got to separate. But it's in us to be afraid to separate. And so that's why there are many strategies that we can use and are using. We create new tribes. Look at us today. Create new tribes because, of course, we're social people and very few of us can stand completely alone. But we also know that we can reframe fear, but also back to taking over our own consciousness and saying, okay, I'm not going to live in that fear place. It means that we choose the news diet that we take in. And that's why I'm proud to say that while I was here in Brattleboro, I was a co-founder of something called the American News Service, which was Solutions News. But today, there's Yes Magazine, Solutions Magazine, YourOliveTree.org, every day. I think we should all pledge before this is over, every day to bring in a story of possibility that we commit to share with someone. That's how we remake those stream beds of possibility in our own consciousness. And commit yourself to sharing them in any way that you think is possible. And so clearly that is one way. Another clear way for me is captured in this person. Wangari is my lodestar of courage. I had the great honor and privilege of getting to know her a little. And what I learned from her is everything you need to know about how to work with fear. And her metaphor was, Frankie, I just kept walking. She planted 7 trees on Earth Day in 1977. And building up the Green Belt movement in Kenya, she was beaten, she was jailed, she was humiliated publicly over and over. And she never stopped. And by the time Anna and I got there in the year 2000, that 7 trees, it had become 20 or 25 million trees. And then she was tapped for the Nobel Peace Prize. And that gave her standing, right, in the global community. And so she teamed up with the UN Environmental Program and came up with this idea for Plant for the Planet. Have you ever heard of it? I only know about it because I was in a high school in Leipzig and I saw, random, right? And I saw a poster about it. Plant for the Planet, 2007, set the goal of a billion trees a year planted by people all over the earth. And when I read that, I thought, oh, good luck. You know, that's really ambitious. I hope you do okay. So I just checked it out. Now, if the original goal was 1 billion a year, we'd be, around 6, 7 billion now? Guess where we are? 12 billion trees. So Wangari means many things to me. But her 7 trees became 12 billion trees. So Wangari also represents to me this. And this is why I so loved last night hearing the story about the college students. That was their kind of MO, right? If we live in a world of continuous change, and we're all connected, then of course it is not possible to know what's possible. So we are free. We are free to go for the world we want. Thank you so much. I honor you. Thank you.
She's got me teary. Oh. Lady Judy Wicks. I want to bring out my own book. She's an author of a new book called Good Morning, Beautiful Business, The Unexpected Journey of an Activist entrepreneur and local economy pioneer. She's the founder of the White Dog Cafe in Philadelphia, the co-founder of Business for Local Living Economies, or BALI, as well as the founder of Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia and Fair Food. I will say I could go on, but I want to get her up here on the stage to talk with all of you. The one thing I will add is that Judy and I met a number of years ago. We're both members of a network called the Social Venture Network. I am the better for knowing Judy. She is definitely in Orly's Force of Nature camp. She is so kind, she's generous, she's wholehearted, and she is so alive. I adore her combination of reverence and irreverence. We are in for another treat and blessing. Please help me in welcoming Judy Wicks to our stage.
Thank you, Lori. You're a dear friend. And it's great to be here with Frankie, another dear friend. I remember selling Frankie's book in 1971 in my first business, a little store in West Philadelphia. And it's great to be back here in Brattleboro, such a unique and beautiful town. So I've just written my first book. Frankie's written 18, but I'm very proud to have this book done. And, I'm looking at slow living from the perspective of an entrepreneur, with a belief that we need to build a new economy, one that's locally based, in order to build sustainable and resilient communities. So today I'm going to tell you some of my story and read a few passages from my book. And I call my book Good Morning Beautiful Business because I had a sign in my closet up in my bedroom where I lived above the White Dog Cafe that I saw each morning that said, Good Morning Beautiful Business. And it was a reminder to me of just how beautiful business is when we put our creativity and our care and our energy into producing a product or a service that we then offer to our community. And it was a reminder to me to think of my own business and how the farmers were out in the fields picking organic fruits and vegetables to bring into town that day. And I would think of the farm animals out in pasture and fresh air and sunshine. And how our goat herder, Dougie, would say that when she kissed her goat's ears, it made the cheese better. And I think that's true. So to me, business is about relationships. Relationships with everyone that we buy from and sell to and work with, and about our relationship with Earth itself. My business was the way that I expressed my love of life, and that's what made it a thing of beauty. So I'm going to read the ending of the preface in the book, just to give you an overview. This book is both a love story and a business book. It's about a love of life, nature, animals, community, and unique local culture. A love of good food and family farms, and a love of democracy. All being threatened by a global economic system driven by profit. It's also about a deep love of business and how we can embrace a way of doing business that is beautiful, that nurtures all that we cherish, and that furthers the creation of a whole new economic system based on caring relationships. Though this new economy is global in vision, my story, and the story for each of us, begins right at home, in our own community, and with our own capacity to recognize and protect what we truly care about. So my first experience with slow living, and this was really slow living, was in an Eskimo village where I lived in 1969 as a Vista volunteer right out of college. And the Eskimos taught me so much, really a new worldview from what I was used to. The Eskimos have a community of cooperation and sharing. One day a woman came and knocked on my door and said, seal party, and beckoned to me to follow. And I went along to find that the tradition of the culture is that when a man catches his first seal after a long, hard winter, his wife has a seal party and invites all the families to their home to distribute the meat between all the families. And then anything else that is left over that is not needed for survival is also redistributed to the community. And in modern times, this is embellished by throwing candy up into the air that the women are all catching here in their skirts. So the Eskimos had no sense of envy or of accumulation. If I said, Lori, I like that blue jacket you're wearing, if you were an Eskimo, you would give it to me. And please don't, because the last time I said this, one of our friends gave me something, which I love, but I have too many clothes that way. Anyway, you have to watch what you admire around Eskimos. This at a young age helped me contrast my own consumer economy to the Eskimos and realize that in our culture, we actually create envy through advertising, and that was discussed last night to some extent, that advertising encourages us to buy more than we need and has us depend on what we have, what we wear, what we possess to have self-esteem. It makes us feel like we never really have enough. So, and we also really reward greed, and we look up to those who have accumulated the most, the ones with the biggest houses and the biggest cars and so on. Here I saw a whole different perspective. The Eskimos were really the happiest people I'd ever known. They believed in abundance, as Frankie talked about, abundance in the universe, that there is enough for all of us if we're willing to share. Their happiness and security did not come from money. It came from community. That's what made them happy. They had a sense of their place in the web of life. I saw in living there that a sustainable economy, one that has lasted for literally thousands of years, can be based on cooperation and sharing rather than competition and hoarding. So this is my restaurant, the White Dog Cafe on Sansom Street, the 3400 block of Sansom Street, and I lived here for 40 years. And I think that's one of the first things we need to do in building a sustainable economy and absolute living is to be connected, to belong to a place, to become knowledgeable of that place, to care for that place, to build community in that place. So. Here at the White Dog, I started the business in 1983 just as a modest coffee and takeout shop. I didn't have much money, and I couldn't afford to put an exhaust system at 3 floors of my house, so our first turnout kitchen to serve hot food was a charcoal grill in the backyard where the waiters had to go down to the basement and out the back door to pick up the food. The dishwasher was actually right in the dining room in the corner with the 3-bowl sink right there. You'd finish your dinner and pass your plates over to the dishwasher who washed them right there and while he chatted with you. If you needed to use the restroom, you were guided up to our house where you'd wave at the 2-year-old and 4-year-old as you made your way to the family bathroom. So that's how I began, but gradually we grew to get our liquor license, which was really important in being able to get the funding to put in our full kitchen. This is a picture of Carol Stout, who is a local brewer, and I'll read you another passage. I was finally able to begin serving the new American beers I was longing for. Customers were surprised when they came into the bar and ordered a popular beer like Heineken to be told that we didn't carry the brand. Then how about a Lowenbrau? Nope. Well, then I'll take a Michelob. Not that either. Then just give me a Bud. Sorry. But how about one of these beers? Handing over our beer list, mighty short at the time, the bartender explained that the White Dog carried only beers from small, independent breweries, later called craft or microbreweries, that brewed beer in small batches. And this is slow beer. I soon discovered that, unlike wine, beer is best when fresh and without the preservatives needed for long-distance shipping, just like local food. So I upped the ante. Not only did I want flavorful all-American beer, I became determined to have beer that was local, fresh, and made without preservatives. So I was thrilled to hear in 1987 that an excellent new brewery had opened just 60 miles to the west in Adamstown. It was not only the first new brewery in Pennsylvania since Prohibition, but it was owned by a woman. I immediately called up the owner, Carol Stout, and asked about ordering her beer. At first, Carol thought 60 miles was too far for her beer to travel. She was into local too. But I convinced her to sell to me, and she drove into town with a keg strapped into her passenger seat with a seatbelt. We laughed about that years later when Carol was celebrating the 20th anniversary of Stout's Brewery after winning many a gold medal at the Great American Beer Festival. It wasn't long before Stout's began brewing our private label beer in 22-ounce bottles. I named it Leg Lifter Lager and designed a label featuring my drawing of a white dog lifting his leg on a red fire hydrant. There we go. We sold a lot of that beer. So one of the challenges that I faced as a young business person was this whole idea, the truism taught in business school, that you grow or die. That our success in the business world, and really in our personal lives as well, is measured by continual material growth. And you know, people would say to me, well, how many restaurants do you have? And I say, well, just one. And at first I was wondering, well, do I just not have the courage to start another White Dog Cafe in New York City or Washington, D.C. or whatever? But I felt as though doing change was like an invasive species. You know, that why should I go into someone else's community and start a business? And so instead, I decided that I would remain a locally based business because I would lose what was most important to me if I were to do a chain, and that's the authentic relationships that I have with my suppliers and customers and employees and my community. So instead of doing another white dog in someone else's community, I did a black cat in my own community, which is our retail store that I opened next door to the White Dog that became a center for selling locally made products as well as fair trade and products made from recycled materials. And that was in 1988. Not only did the Black Cat offer a convenient and friendly place to get responsible gifts, but it added to the vitality of my community. That's the inside of the store. So by our 10th anniversary in 1993, when we celebrated our success in growing to 200 seats, I realized that my business was as big as I wanted it to be. We had reached a financially viable size, so I stopped growing the White Dog physically and focused on growing it deeper, strengthening relationships with all those involved with the business. You might say that rather than making business decisions to maximize profits, I made decisions to maximize relationships. And in the long run, I believe this was also the reason for our financial sustainability. I had come to realize that we could measure our success in other ways than growing physically. We could measure by increasing our knowledge, expanding our consciousness, deepening our relationships, developing our creativity, building community, and enhancing our natural world. All this while also increasing our own happiness and well-being and having more fun. So I started going deeper in my community by starting programs, by becoming more complex in what I did. So this is a dinner table talk. Actually, Frankie LePay and Anna, for that matter, spoke at the White Dog. I think Frankie came a couple times, but we had speakers like Lester Brown and Michael Pollan, and on subjects from climate change to drug policy reform. Some people claim that my true profession was that I used good food to lure innocent customers into social activism. I think that's probably true. Here's Patch Adams at a table talk. We had storytellings giving voice to underrepresented groups, whether they're recent immigrants or, in this case, the same-sex marriage, a gay couple and a lesbian couple telling their stories. We did community tours. This went to a prison to look at the organic garden that the prisoners had made. Affordable housing tour. A community garden tour. And this was really cool because you'd see the interaction between customers coming in from the suburbs and Center City, going into the inner city to discuss roses with an inner city gardener, building community across the region. This was one of our many, many annual events. This was a Martin Luther King memorial dinner that we had for over 20 years. It was the first event that I did, and also the last one before I sold the restaurant 26 years later. And one of our, this is a Freedom Seder that we had each year. And we had a lot of festivals out in the street, and this was one of my favorite ones, the Liberty and Justice for All Ball on the eve of the 4th of July. And after we had a buffet dinner of farm fresh food, I would put on a little skit called Birth of the Nation. First would come the Revolutionary War drummer, Then I came as a pregnant colonial woman, led by my midwife. I had a sign on my back. George Washington slept here. My midwife helped me into the bed. And then she turned to the audience and said, 1, 2, 3, push. And everyone yelled, push. And then under the covers, I pushed my beach ball down through a hidden hole in the bed. And my midwife delivered my first twin, my second twin, Liberty and Justice. And they did a tap dance, a Yankee Doodle Dandy. Then we wheeled out the Statue of Liberty. And we all sang God Bless America. We lit our sparklers. So this is the kind of fun that we can have in our own communities. Like the strolling of the heifers. You know, we don't need to go to Hawaii. We don't need to spend a lot of carbons and dollars traveling to exotic places. We can have fun in our own communities. Through our many educational programs and sustainable practices, I was engaged in all these alternative ways to grow at the White Dog Cafe and the Black Cat, and in helping my customers as well as interested staff grow with me. Financial sustainability was an important factor in serving all of our stakeholders, from suppliers to investors. But ultimately, we measured our success not simply by profits and continual material growth, but by the continued growth of happiness and the well-being of our customers, employees, community, and natural world. I felt as though I had reinvented growth in a way that worked for me and worked for the planet and the people around me too. So one of our programs was an international sister restaurant program called Table for 5 Billion, Please. I had a dream that I walked into a restaurant, and rather than asking for a table for 2 or 4, I said, I'll take a table for 5 billion, please, imagining a world where everyone had a place at the table financially and economically, and everyone had enough to eat. And we took our customers and staff to different parts of the world that had disagreements with the United States in terms of foreign policy. And I learned so much in these travels about the global economy and how corporate globalization was really destroying local economies around the world and natural environments. This was a picture of our trip to Cuba, and it was in Cuba that I really learned a lot about the capacity to do urban farming, that Havana, every vacant lot in Havana was planted with gardens, and Havana was able to achieve food security without the use of pesticides and chemicals because they couldn't afford it. It was a blessing in disguise that the Soviet Union collapsed and stopped supporting them. They couldn't afford to have oil, so they learned how to farm without using fossil fuels, without using fossil fuel and chemical-based fertilizers and pesticides and large machinery and so on. This is a picture of our farmer. We brought one of our organic farmers from home to Cuba on our trip, and here he is comparing notes with a Cuban farmer about composting. And he told us that the most advanced organic farming he'd ever seen was taking place in Cuba. Here's a couple fellows who had a medicinal herb farm, and they had been soldiers in the army, and that was one of the ways that Cuba was able to reach food security, is that they literally converted swords into plowshares by taking people out of the army and teaching them to be farmers. A really good idea for us, and here's a group in Colorado that's doing that in the United States. I wish we would take all of our soldiers and turn them into farmers. So this is my trip to Chiapas was really life-changing for me. I ended up going down there 10 times over a 10-year period, and I was very intrigued by why did the Zapatistas have their revolution, basically a nonviolent revolution, on the day that NAFTA went into effect, January 1st, 1994. And when I got down there and talked with the Zapatistas, I found out that they predicted that with the lowering of the borders, allowing U.S. Subsidized corn to be dumped into Mexico at below the cost of production because of our farm bill providing large subsidies to corporate farmers, that this would put out of business the indigenous corn farmers in Mexico. And of course, that's exactly what did happen and caused a huge increase in immigration from Mexico to the United States. So the Zapatistas were saying that they wanted to have their local self-reliance, as they had had for hundreds, if not thousands of years. They wanted to be able to grow their corn for the domestic market. They wanted to be able to grow their fruits and vegetables to feed their families. They wanted to keep their own cultures and traditions. They wanted to be able to teach their children in their own language and teach their children their worldview. They wanted their women to continue to make the clothing in the way that they had done for generations, instead of being forced to work in the maquiladoras to produce cheap clothes for us. So I began to see, in the beginning, I thought I had gone to Chiapas to help the Zapatistas, but really I began to understand that I was going there to help myself, to help my own communities, to help communities everywhere, because I began to see the links between what was happening to the farmers in Chiapas with the farmers in Pennsylvania, that our small farmers throughout the United States were also being forced off the land because of our policies, because of the power of large corporate growers. So I started to imagine a different worldview, a different global economy, that rather than being controlled by these large corporations that were really gaining so much power that all of us, whether we lived in Mexico or the United States or the Far East, were becoming dependent on large corporations to bring us our food, to bring us our clothes, to bring us our energy, all of our basic needs, that we were becoming reliant on long-distance shipping for what we needed to survive. And especially now with climate change being such a challenge, and peak oil as well, that we need to become locally self-reliant. So I started to imagine a global economy that, instead of being controlled by large corporations, was an intricate network, an intricate web of small-to-small fair trade relationships that connected local sustainable economies that were self-reliant in basic needs, and then trading globally for what was not available locally, whether it was coffee or bananas or whatever, but also trading in what we produced that was creative and unique in our communities, whether it was a special wine or cheese or special fashion, but not what we needed in order to survive. And that we needed to take an economy that was controlled by fast-growing multinationals to decentralize the ownership, to have more owners, and that it was by having more owners that we increased not only our local self-reliance and our economic power, but also our democratic power, our political power that is now gotten us into a dangerous situation, also discussed last night and by Frankie, that these large corporations are really controlling our government. So one way that we can fight back is to create an alternative economy, to stop buying from the large corporations and create our own local economies. So that's what inspired me to start the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies. And we now have over 30,000 local independent businesses within our network that are working in about 83 different communities, including the Vermont Business for Social Responsibility is a member, and Pioneer Valley, and Sustainable Business Network of Massachusetts, and a number of New Hampshire local networks. So meanwhile, back in Philadelphia, I had been growing a network of local farmers that supplied the White Dog Cafe. I knew about the importance of buying pastured hens and eggs from uncaged hens. But I didn't know about the horrible way that pigs were being treated in our industrial agriculture system until I read John Robbins' book, Diet for a New America, back in the 90s, and found out about how these mother sows were kept in these cages where they can't take a step forward or backward or turn around for their entire lives. They're kept in these windowless barns where they can't even have a breath of fresh air or feel sunshine. Pigs are very intelligent animals. They say as intelligent as a 3-year-old child, but yet they have nothing to do but gnaw on the bar of their cage. They're artificially inseminated. Their babies are taken away prematurely, artificially inseminated again. And I thought, this is really, a breach. This is against nature to treat mothers in this way, and this is against a break in our fiduciary duty to be stewards, good stewards of farm animals, and really destroying our own humanity to have this wholesale cruelty. So I realized with horror that the pork I was serving in my restaurant must come from the system, because unless you know otherwise, something like 90–95% of the pork in the United States comes from factory farming. So I just went into the kitchen and said, take all the pork off the menu, the bacon, the pork chops, the ham, that we could not be a part of this brutal system. And we went about finding pastured pig farmers, and this is an Amish farmer with a big mother sow who's building a nest for her babies. Here's how pigs like to sleep in pig piles in the mud. Happy pigs. Then I found out about the plight of the cow, how cows are herbivores. They're supposed to be eating grass, but yet we take them off grass and put them in barns or these stockyards and feed them subsidized grain again. So we started buying grass-fed beef. This is Dr. Bill Elkins with his Black Angus herd. Here's Dougie. This is the one who kisses her goat's ears. So I finally got to the point where I looked at my menu and thought, gee, you've done it. You have a humane menu. All of our meat and poultry and animal products are coming from small family farms that treat the animals with respect and kindness. This is going to be our market niche. This is our competitive advantage. This is all about us. We're the only restaurant in Philadelphia that's doing this. And then I had a transformational moment. I thought to myself, well, Judy, if you really do care about the pigs, if you really care about the small farmers being driven out of business, if you really care about the environment that's being polluted by the concentration of manures, with like 10,000 pigs in one barn with all that manure going into the water system, the air, and the soil, if you really care about the workers in these ghastly slaughterhouses and factory farms, and you care about the consumers that are eating meat that's full of antibiotics and hormones, then rather than keep this as your competitive advantage, you share your knowledge and your supply sources with your competitors. So that was a step that I took that changed my whole life, because I realized, up until that point, I thought that the highest thing I could do was to have good practices within my company, but I realized that wasn't enough anymore, that there's no such thing as one sustainable business, that we can only be part of a sustainable system. And in order to build that sustainable system, that we have to cooperate and share. In order to build a whole economy, a whole natural system based on these values. So once I made that decision, everything changed for me. I became infected with the sharing germ. I wanted to share, I wanted to cooperate. I have been doing that ever since. So I started White Dog Community Enterprises and started putting 20% of my profits, into my nonprofit. I asked the farmer who was bringing us in 2 pigs a week, you have to buy the whole pig when you buy this way, if he wanted to increase his business, and he said yes. And I said, what's holding you back? And he said he needed $30,000 to buy a refrigerated truck so he could deliver to all the restaurants, so I loaned him the money. Then we hired our first staff person at a Fair Food, was our first project as part of White Dog Community Enterprises, and her job was to go around to the other restaurants and give them a booklet of how to buy from farmers and listing all the farmers and their phone numbers and what they all grew. And now we've connected hundreds of restaurants and stores in the urban marketplace with the farmers in our local area. And Fair Food is now 12 years old and has a robust year-round local grocery store of all locally made products. We also started the Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia, and working on building our local economy in our own area. And this is a picture of our retreat up in the Poconos, and actually Andy Smith is playing the drum there, and he's here. This is his second year, I believe, at the Slow Living Summit. And what I wanted to say here is that there's collective joy in working together toward a shared vision for our economy and our community. And I discovered that building a new global economy rests on a simple quality, our capacity to care. That change begins in the heart of the entrepreneur and in the heart of all of us, of all of citizens. That is the power of love and compassion that can bring real change. For me, when I decided to share and cooperate, it wasn't because I said to myself, sharing and cooperating are virtues and you should do that. I did this because I loved pigs. I did this because I love nature, I love community. And so I feel that the transformation that we need to make to build slow living economies is to open our own hearts and to be guided by a balance of the head and the heart. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
So as you go forward into the rest of your day today, please enjoy the wonderful breakout sessions that we have coming up. There will also be the book signing by Francis and Judy in the lobby here. And we'll be back here for 1:40. If you can, we'll be starting right at 1:45 with Slow Design, the impact of mindful design on the quality of public spaces and their communities. I do just want to say that last night, I know for those of us that were here, how many were here last evening? Yeah, a really deep opening. And today is a full day. And full days can be very, very stimulating. I just want to also invite you to take rest when you need to take rest, to make sure you're drinking water and eating well. And I want to let you know that there is a quiet room over in the Grad Center. It's a tiny room when you go into the Grad Center. It's to the left. You weave around and you'll find it, or ask around. There's a sign on the door so you'll see it. If you want to go there for any reflection or any nap, please don't hesitate to go there. See you back here. Have a beautiful midday. Thank you so much for your presence.